Welcome to the Sherman Report. Here's Peter Sherman.
Good day. It's a Wednesday. Nice to be in the middle of the week. I wish the weather were better. Wherever you are, maybe it is. In Toronto, where I'm based, maybe it isn't. In Ottawa, we have a parliament where our representatives debate. But then you knew that. At least they create the illusion that they are debating. We are by now all aware that it's hardly civil and informed by partisan attitudes and accusations as it is. We have a clip of the health minister, Mark Holland, wailing away because he thinks a conservative government would cut every support program the Liberal government has brought in as they seek to make sure that for Canadians, all bases are covered. This is under the aegis of a push and shove match between Poilievre and Trudeau and company over a motion of non-confidence that isn't going to pass this week anyway. There will be another one next week. I have some editorial comment myself on what's going on in the Middle East right now, that the major effort there is Israel versus Hezbollah, not Israel versus Hamas anymore. So that's changed the complexion of things, but fighting is still fighting and dying is still dying. I also have something to say about our government, where Liberal members of Parliament have introduced a motion in the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee to study the recognition of a Palestinian state without negotiations with Israel. Well, then who are you going to have negotiations with? Because I don't recognize anybody other than folks who say they're Palestinians that constitutes a government. What Palestinian state are you talking about, and where is it, and run by whom? I'm not a fan of the Liberals, but this is basically a ship of fools coasting along. And our friend Andy Stinton will join us on things that have been keeping him awake at night. And right here, you'll hear more, always on the Sherman Report.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
I read something earlier today in an Israeli newspaper that I received from a friend every now and then, and it made sense to me. Credit to World Israel News, where it appeared, and I'm going to read a portion of it to you so you can form your own opinions. Here we go. A senior U.S. official slammed the prospect of an Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon and called on Jerusalem to pursue a diplomatic solution to end the conflict with Hezbollah, despite nearly a year of failed negotiations. The Biden administration official, who spoke to reporters at the UN General Assembly in New York, where everybody who's anybody is congregating this week, this was on condition of anonymity, claimed that Washington was floating various proposals for a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Isn't it interesting? Washington's been floating various approaches for a year on fighting between Israel and Hamas. And where did that get us? Anyway, I digress. However, when prompted by reporters as to details on the proposals, the official would not elaborate. I'm quoting, "We've got some concrete ideas, and we're going to be discussing them with allies and partners this week to try to figure out the way forward on this." End of quote. This is what the official said. The U.S. is prioritizing finding an off-ramp that will first and foremost prevent further escalation in the fighting, he said. We obviously do not believe that a ground invasion of Lebanon is going to contribute to reducing tensions in the region, to preventing an escalatory spiral of violence. And that's in part why we are so focused on utilizing this week to explore these ideas and see if we can develop this off-ramp, he continued. The Biden administration official also claimed that military action never results in stability. And that's the end of the World Israel News excerpt. So that last line is interesting. The Biden administration official also claimed that military action never results in stability. So no shit, Sherlock. Anyway, I have a very difficult time, I should say, understanding the Americans or any third party that wants to intervene and create peace, create peace. It's easy to see why. This is yet another attempt to cool things off in the region. How do you rate the success of similar attempts when the major fighting was down south along the coast a few miles in Gaza? Nothing, right? While America has had no problem watching 1 million people die in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, nobody's pushing for peace, and certainly not America, not Canada. America gets it. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is a long-term investment. Nobody is pushing for peace. A long-term investment for the United States, as opposed to the Middle East conflict or conflicts, which don't hold any financial promise. Sounds terrible, but it's true. At some point, the grain, the natural gas, the minerals, all available in Ukraine will be of remarkable interest to the Americans. So will the rebuilding process, in which America will play a major part, mark my words. As for Israel, now hurting economically, and seriously so, but capable of putting up a good fight, well, things have changed. Israel has always capitulated in the past to external pressure to end conflicts with neighbors. That in itself is odd because Israel has never instigated a war. It has, however, had to respond to many of them. Things have changed for Israel. Things have changed for Jewish people. Jews don't line up to die anymore. That was in World War II. That's a long time ago. And in many prior conflicts. Goes back a couple of thousand years. Now, Jews engage and eliminate their enemies. Many in the world are surprised at that and shocked. To them, I say, stop looking for ceasefires. Once October 7th, 2023 had occurred, the decision was to see the conflict with unhappy neighbors through. And that is precisely what you're seeing now. So get used to it. Back in a moment.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
Meanwhile, in Canada, there's a different discussion. Our government has flipped and isn't much interested in Israel anymore. One of many reasons why I have no compunction in telling people I'd only vote Conservative. What's happening on the other side of the floor? Liberal members of Parliament have introduced a motion in the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee to study the recognition of a Palestinian state without negotiations involving Israel. This is another great and brilliant reaction from the Liberal Party of Canada. The reaction from the dominant organization involved in Canadian Jewish and Israeli affairs is CIJA. CIJA's reaction. Its president and CEO is Shimon Fogel. Here's a little of what he said about the new initiative, and I'm quoting, "This reckless move undermines peace and jeopardizes Israel's security. Without negotiations, how can we be certain that a future Palestinian state would commit to peace, security, and coexistence with Israel? Immediate recognition without these guarantees not only threatens Israel's security, but also rewards groups like Hamas that choose terrorism over peaceful negotiations." The division within Palestinian leadership, where a weak government holds control in the West Bank and Hamas, a recognized terrorist organization, dominates Gaza, raises critical concerns about who would represent the Palestinian state. This uncertainty is compounded by unresolved major final status issues such as refugees and borders and the status of Jerusalem, along with a myriad of practical matters like water rights, the electricity grid, and control of airspace. Without negotiations, these issues remain unaddressed, threatening both Israel's security and the stability of a future Palestinian state. We firmly believe that recognizing a Palestinian state without direct negotiations with Israel will undermine the prospects for lasting peace. This shift reflects Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly's abandonment of a long-standing policy upheld by both liberal and conservative governments for decades, which required peace negotiations as a precondition for Palestinian statehood. I just have to ask this question. I'll throw it up in the air. With who exactly are you going to negotiate? And is there a party on the side wishing a Palestinian state that wants anything less than all of Israel? It's ridiculous. Further quote from Shimon Fogel. "It is especially alarming that much of the study is scheduled to take place during the Jewish High Holy Days. For your information, they start next week. That effectively excludes the participation of the Jewish community representatives at a crucial time for engagement." Unquote. Well, I've read this book before. I don't know about you. Joly works for Trudeau. Trudeau is in line to lose an election. Trudeau needs all the votes he can get, and the Jewish votes have evaporated, partly because they just realized he wasn't for them, and partly because he wasn't for them. Okay, let's go look for votes on the other side, he thinks. Justin, the so-called Palestinians could not and would not negotiate their way out of a paper bag. And that's the way conflict goes there. It's why conflict still exists there. And as I mentioned in the prior editorial piece, things have changed for Israel and for the Jews. Jews don't line up to die anymore. That was in World War II and in many prior conflicts. Now, Jews engage and eliminate their enemies. Let me say that again. Eliminate their enemies. What the Palestinians want is non-negotiable. They want all of Israel absolutely cleared of Jews, however that happens. You go negotiate, Melanie Joly. In fact, as the saying goes, negotiate this.
You're with the Sherman Report, daily news commentary, live at 5 p.m. Video version live at X, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's Peter Sherman.
On the subject of this liberal government and off the subject of the Middle East, the rhetoric is at high volume on that side of the House of Commons. And in the following clip, you can see Health Minister Mark Holland howling, literally howling, at who he believes to be the awful Pierre Poilievre leading the Conservatives. When you keep fish around for too long, Mark Holland, it turns rotten and it smells bad. That, to me, is the Trudeau government, the government of which you're a part. It has gone well past its best before date. The Conservatives don't want a series of supports for Canadians, as with the Liberals, and their ability to cast such a wide net in trying to effect that. The old parable about not giving a man a fish, but teaching him how to fish applies here, and you don't understand that. Conservatives do not want to cut programs. They want to allow hard-pressed Canadians to retain more of their own money so they can make their own decisions about what is best for their families. Listen.
They're going to cut the dental. They're going to axe the pharmacare. They're going to break the health system, and they're going to destroy childcare. The difference between those slogans and the nonsense he throws around, the vacuous garbage that's best left for Nabisco, not for the House of Commons, is that's the stuff he's actually going to do. And at some point, he's going to have to look in the eyes of seniors and tell them what he's going to do to dental care. He's going to have to look in the eyes of diabetes patients and say what he's going to do with their diabetes medication. At some time, the vitriol done and the truth comes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that when that member thinks of the prospect of a carbon tax election, he comes unglued and becomes very rattled and loses control of himself, waving his hands around because he's desperate to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. What he actually wants to do is quadruple the carbon tax, which will grind our economy to a halt. It will be a nuclear winter for our economy. Why don't we allow Canadians to vote in a carbon tax election to decide if they're ready to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
The confidence motion, which would serve to send Canadians to the polls, will be lost because the Conservatives will vote alone. That's a pity. The NDP, of course, has no money to properly contest an election, and the Bloc Québécois has no aspirations about forming government. They never could. They're a Quebec-only party. So they just tell it like it is. We'll support Trudeau as long as we can get more for Quebec. What a government. What an opposition. Is that how government works? It does indeed here in our northern socialist paradise. Back in a moment.
You're with the Sherman Report. Daily news commentary available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with video posted on YouTube and Facebook. Here's Peter Sherman.
And once again, our friend Andy Stinton joins us, still sitting in Costa Rica, looking ruddy, but maybe not tanned. And you told me it's an overcast day. Cry me a frickin' river.
It's overcast. It's 29. I'm down here, and it used to be the rainy season. Remember in the tropics when there was a rainy season?
Sure.
No, there is not anymore, Peter. Please be educated. It is now called the green season, encouraging people to come down and frolic when the trees are growing due to the
I don't know.
rain.
I was in India a few months ago, and they kept telling me, good thing you're here this week because the monsoons start next week. And they did.
And that was their green season. It's now the green season, not
Lasts
the
a
rainy
long
season.
time. Floods a lot of villages. Anyway, we're off topic because we haven't started on a topic.
When are we ever on topic?
Never. So listen, let's
Can
try
I explain
one.
something to the viewers? Peter and I spend 10 minutes on coming up with topics and blah, 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 and we have a list of them. And after we finish recording, which I enjoy greatly, I go back and go, we only did one of those topics and not very well, and we've got off somewhere else.
Because the problem with guys like Andy and me is we can talk about anything, and we want to make sure that some of these things we talk about interest you. So I'm just going to say electric cars. Electric cars, go.
I think they've lost the cachet. I don't believe in them. I never did. Okay, because and if you try to go on an ecological basis, those batteries destroy the earth, blah, 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 blah.
True.
I just don't see there's an infrastructure for them built in any country. And I think the giveaway, plus the president of Hyundai Kennedy told me, is that none of the gas stations are freaking out about electric cars, are they? They're not going.
No, not really. I mean, I see chargers in places that are looking for you to park and shop. So large shopping malls that'll have chargers. Not enough, but they'll have chargers. I'll give you a personal story. In our condominium, and we have a 2-tower complex, it was decided that we should offer the residents a chance to purchase an electric charger, an electric car charger, in case you wanted a car. We didn't have the facility to do it. So nobody in a reasonably well-heeled community could buy an electric car because they couldn't plug it in the garage. So we decided to offer them, and we polled the population, and we got 20 people who wanted them, and they had to pay $9,000 a piece to have the charger installed so they could then plug it in the car and pay a per hour rate to charge. And 20 people bought them. I can't say whether anybody's using them because I don't know. People don't announce, guess what, I got an electric car. But I certainly know that not anywhere near all of them are being used. And I wonder if there will ever be an expansion, because I'm not against looking. I mean, I've got a car that I could change at some point. I could want to change. It is a lovely vehicle that I enjoy driving. It is a gas guzzler. And when I change, my tendency at this point would be to buy another one. I only drive 1,000 kilometers a month, so I'm in no hurry to do anything. If I were going to look at an electric vehicle, because I'm against them for some of the reasons you state, I would take a cue from friends of mine who have gone out of their way to get hybrids. And the reason I think hybrid, if you really want to be more earth conscious and all the rest of it, the hybrid is an ability not to have to buy a $9,000 charger and not to have to find a charging station when you drive from, say, Montreal to Toronto and you're halfway and the battery runs out. That's where I'd go, hybrid.
I think you're ideal for an electric car. If you go 1,000 kilometers a month, I think it makes sense for you. What makes no sense to me is the payback. Well, I bought an SUV at one point and I was deciding whether to go hybrid or regular. And the sales guy was really good. And he said, yes, a good car salesman. That's like a good lawyer, hard to find. And he said, listen, there's this page on the internet. Put in how many miles that you do a year or kilometers, and it will tell you what it costs you extra to get the hybrid and what your payback is. And there was no payback for me. And our good friend John Moore, who's News Talk 1010, bought an electric car. You can either, not a hybrid, it's you plug it in or you use the engine. He living in Toronto rarely uses the gasoline engine to go to and from work.
Because he lives 5 kilometers from work.
We could walk, actually.
Right.
So I do car shows quite often. We were sitting there one day, and I was doing a high-end media day. And the president of Canada, who's a super nice man, I said, "Where's everything going?" And he points across there, and he says, "Look in that corner. You've walked past it 10 times." I said, "What?" He said, "The hydrogen car."
Aha. Now there's the next big thing.
That's where it will end up. This is just a passing phase. It will end up with hydrogen. Gas stations have tanks underground that you can fill up with hydrogen. It's cost effective. Hydrogen solid state batteries, that's the end of the line to me. Or you buy a tractor.
And that's what I'd probably opt for. And I've been thinking about that for a while. In 2025 model year, you've got a few Korean companies and I believe a German company all coming out with their very first effort in the area of the hydrogen fuel cell. So I'd look at that because, you say, well, you only drive 1,000 kilometers a month. An electric car would work for you. It would work for me. But look at the outlay. The $9,000 in my building, the cost of the car, which is what's it going to be? 60,000 at least. I wouldn't do it.
No, it's not worth it. No.
Okay. So let's move on. Our friends south of the border, need I say, are in the throes of a wild election, and Canadians do nothing but talk about it. And I have to admit, we sometimes reflect that because we want to talk about what you're talking about. Having said that, we're not paying a lot of attention to Canadian politics, are we?
No, we're not. I mean, I'm going to refuse to talk about the Trump thing anymore. Obviously, the man has mental problems, and that whole thing's a mess. It's a good soap opera. I'll probably wait till the election to actually watch, but it is a distraction. It is a distraction. Everywhere you go on the news, it's Trump, this, that, and the other. Meanwhile, there's this whole soap opera going on in our own parliaments, which is inexcusable. It's just people playing politics. And I don't, it couples with two things. They're playing games, but then again, that's what politicians
But that's the
do.
nature of Westminster, the politics of England that have been passed
And
along to us.
not particularly good at it. We're not a country that I don't think, I think he will get in. I think, but we will vote Trudeau out. But I think he's the deplorable politician. He's using this name call. I don't abide by name calling, period. You could disagree with somebody, but still respect them. He might have a different policy from Trudeau. Maybe Trudeau does some strange things sometimes, but tell me about them.
I don't see a lot of name calling. I mean, there certainly was a period of time.
Oh, come on.
You've been away for too many weeks. They're busy.
Well, I have the
debating
news down here,
Well, they're busy debating a confidence motion or a motion of non-confidence that's not going to be passed by the NDP. Why? Because the NDP has no money to fight an election, is the real truth. And the Bloc Québécois has no reason to. It's a Quebec party that is going to try to elicit as much as it can out of Trudeau until it can't. And that's when the election's going to happen.
So why is Poilievre wasting our time except to do grandstanding? If he's not careful, I understand the movement. I understand he's the next prime minister, but he may spend some of his dollars, of his credibility and anti-Trudeau dollars, if he keeps this up. Because I'm looking at this and going, why do I care? Why do I care from a man who doesn't have a platform?
When I went to Queen's Park, I only ever served in opposition, so I learned opposition really well for 7 years. And all of my colleagues who had been there sitting in opposition for a while, because they hadn't been in power since, it was 25 years at the time, and that was Mike Harris. So they'd say, you are in opposition, your job is to oppose. That's what opposition does.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at in the Canadian House of Commons at this point is opposition opposing. They oppose the carbon tax primarily. They want to evoke an election on the basis of a carbon tax. I don't like it any better than Poilievre does, but I don't sit around calling Trudeau a wacko because he's not here. If he were here, I probably would.
But here's what it is. Once again, politicians have spelling issues. It's opposition, not obstruction. That's a different word. And he's just obstructing the conveyance of Parliament, the conveyance of our laws, the implementation and creation of our laws.
You mean you should just leave the party in power alone to make laws and not say anything?
I think you leave. No, you oppose them. You try and give a different viewpoint. You try to get a different viewpoint into their agenda. You try to change things, but obstructing them, just calling a motion of confidence because he can, is obstruction, not opposition.
Well, he could have called a motion of confidence before when the NDP supported or ostensibly had that support agreement, but he saw no reason. Now there's no support agreement, but the NDP, which is a bunch of BSers anyway, is making like it actually could pull down the government or would. My guess at this point, we've talked this to death, is we're probably going to go the distance and vote on October 20th, 2025 anyway. But let's be clear. The business of politics, whether you're debating a legitimate law or you're debating an overall stance, we know what the polls say. We know that people are tired of Trudeau, whether they were a Poilievre or not. And what he's doing is he's trying to demonstrate that the things that Trudeau has done, and Trudeau runs a nanny state, okay, is we're going to give school lunches to kids. Never gave them before. What's changed that they need them? Never. We put in a carbon tax. We're going to fix the world.
I may interrupt you there with a woke moment.
Sure.
You said you have to listen to what the polls say. They're now called. You ready for a clever woke joke coming up here?
A clever woke joke? Sure.
Okay. Don't put your eyes up like that, young man. They're Eastern Europeans now. They're not Poles.
Oh, I'm sorry. then we'll have Eastern Europeans on the elections. Doesn't sound right. I guess we should move on. The point is, we're going to keep talking about this on one level or another for I think a number of weeks, and if not a number of months. But there's another. I'm going to go back to the first subject because there's something that we didn't touch on that we should, because it dovetails with electric cars, electric bikes, electric scooters, generally bicycles. You asked a question. Look at you. You're freaking out, and I can't blame you. You're asking a question, and you sent this one to me. Should the public? Is it time to regulate everything on the road? Everything that moves on the road? And my short answer is yep.
Here's what it is. I'm a relatively nice person. I am tempted on occasion to want to run pedestrians or cyclists or other vehicle users off the road because I'm an old grumpy guy. What I don't want,
ladies and gentlemen, an admission. Go ahead.
Right. Yes, it's admission. What I don't want on my conscience is a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 20-year-old dying on the bumper of my car because they went through a stop sign without looking. I don't want
wrecking your car in the process.
I'm wrecking my car in the. Yes, it's in my shirt.
Sorry. I had to make some black humor.
You did very well, and somebody has to regulate this. I don't want to. I have nightmares. Sometimes I get to a stop sign and I can see the cyclist coming, and if I didn't look, I'd have him off his bike. And one day, hopefully, it won't happen. Somebody's not going to look, and they're going to kill a small child. It's time for the politicians, including the opposition, right, to step up and regulate these two-wheeled vehicles the same as they regulate cars and motorbikes.
Okay, so let me tell you something. When I was a little boy, I'm talking now 7, 8, 9, the schoolyard was painted with the same machines that they make the white lines on the road. And they created an intersection, they created lanes, and they invited the police to come and attend. And we had to go through and stop when an officer put his hand up, or go when he told us to go. And if you passed successfully, you got to hand over $2 that you had ripped off your dad for. And they put a little license plate on the back of your bike. And you were licensed, and they knew who you were. I thought that was a great idea. And we're going back pretty well 70 years.
I think
you do that now.
I think it's a great idea. And I'm not opposed to bikes. I'm in Costa Rica, and what strikes me here, they are very used to lunatic motorcycle riders. But you're used to them, and they're good at what they do, and they go where they're supposed to go. I'm less scared here with them doing what you would think is crazy things than I am in Canada, where somebody gets some of these electric bikes, trikes, whatever, and just puts them on the road, and they don't have to go along with the laws of the land.
Oh, look,
And
I'm
they
never
should
going to
do.
forget having read a book about the worst driving places in the world, and they talk about Italy, where if the horn breaks, you throw away the car. They talk about the 9 lanes that encircle the Arc de Triomphe. But you want to know what the number one worst driving city is in the world, according to these guys? Toronto. It's Toronto.
I've
And
been
that's where
saying
you and I live.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I grew up in Britain and I come here and it's single roads. I'm used to this much space between me and the bus. So
Yep.
I was brought up to drive with those spaces. I go to the Arc de Triomphe. I'm in my element because everybody's going in one direction and they're committed.
I had no problem with it. Got
The
almost
issue
no
in-
time left. I want to
Okay,
run to
the
another
issue in
subject.
Canada is we have beautiful wide roads. They're amazing. They're very well maintained, and people all they have to do is steer a car between 3 lanes. They don't have to drive. Thusly, I agree with you. Number
Yeah, well,
one,
you
worst
know what?
drivers.
Canadian drivers, you get on the 401. I could go off on a tangent on this, but I want to get one more little topic in, even though we're kind of over time.
Is
The
your
Ontario-
tangent licensed?
No,
You
the
want to-
Ontario Premier, Doug Ford. It's not of interest to our people outside of, well, maybe it is,
Yes, it
outside
is.
of Ontario. But the Ontario Premier, who, if you're in the States, is like a prime minister of a province. His name is Doug Ford, and he made a comment in a public appearance on homeless encampments, of which we have many. And he said, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life if you can't work. But if you can, get off your ASS and do it or nothing from me. He spelled it, so I spelled it. Get off your ass and go to work. You agree?
Standing ovation. In Britain, they would have said bottom. That's the problem with North Americans. They say ass. We say bottom. Right. That's one of the major
Derriere.
Right.
Anyway, look,
No.
there's no argument here. We put it on the agenda. We both happen to agree, and Doug Ford is right on this.
The only thing he didn't do, he should have said asses, and he should have used the F word.
Well, on that note, Andy Stinton in Costa Rica, thanks so much for your appearance today, and we'll look for you next week. Have a great day.
See you later, Chuck.
All right.
The Sherman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petersherman.com. Thanks for listening to The Sherman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petersherman.com.